Call the meeting to order. You want me to do it?
You usually.
Okay.
This is my point. Do what you usually do.
Okay. For those joining online or via recording, the Affordable Housing Committee meeting of July 10th. We're meeting in the Old Town Hall Conference Room on the second floor. It's now 7:03 p.m. We do have a quorum. With that, I'll turn things over to the chair. Call the meeting to order. Introductions.
Great, terrific. So with a member of the public, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Josh Serio. I live at Ramsey Road. Here just to see information about affordable housing in the town.
Okay.
It's an issue that I'm kind of concerned about.
Excellent, John. Great to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
We'll do a quick introduction. So,
Am I the only public person?
You're the only now.
So, wow.
No. We'll go around and introduce ourselves, John.
Okay, that's nice.
So, Bob Ellinger.
Janice Colabasis.
Hi,
Becky Page.
Gretchen Gertner, the recording secretary.
nice to meet you, everybody.
And Brian, you want to introduce yourself?
Brian Beatty. How you doing, Brian? Thank you.
Steve Rothwell.
I'm Earl Brian Cooler, John.
I'm Mark Barnhart.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Great. Okay, everyone. The first item will be to act on the minutes of the June 12th meeting. To approve. Second, so move to approve by Bob Ellinger, second, Steve Bradwell.
Question. Mr. Barnhart reported that Mr. Ivers is working on finding out. Who's Mr. Ivers?
Tom Ivers is a temporary part-time employee with my office who's assisting on housing-related issues, specifically putting the finishing touches on our application for a temporary employee. Right.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Hopefully, at some point, we might be able to petition the town boards to make that position more or less permanent. I'm not finding myself stretched way too thin at the moment.
Well, we all strongly endorse action along those lines.
It's kind of an experiment, so.
Maybe we'll get to meet Tom someday.
Tom usually, the last meeting or so, he's been online, so he's been scoping
Is
out.
he the guy who's in your?
Well,
Okay, I met him.
Tom comes most recently, he was with the city of Norwalk, prior to that with the city of Milford. Has had a long career, is more or less semi-retired in housing related work. He was working for the city of Norwalk doing a major redevelopment there, which involved a huge capital stack for the Norwalk Redevelopment Authority. So he comes with a wealth of experience, both in fair housing, housing development, housing enforcement, all kinds of issues. So I was very fortunate to talk him out of retirement to help me out for a little bit. So very happy to have him. So,
Not the guy I met, because the guy I met was very young.
well, that must be Ronnie. Ronnie is our intern for the summer.
Okay.
So Ronnie is with us for about 8 weeks. Is a junior, rising junior at the University of Santa Clara. And a graduate of, sorry, Fairfield Ludlam. Bad mistake. Ludlam.
All good. So we are expecting a presentation from. So
Just like you was
So Mr. Russo was listed at the end of the agenda, but in deference to him, we will move him. We'll move it to the top of the agenda if you're ready.
Technically, we have to have a motion to.
John, if you want to sit up here, just making sure you want to sit up there. Welcome to sit up here at the table with us.
Oh, that's fine. I'm good. Thank you.
Nope, sorry.
Absolutely.
This is, everyone knows Attorney Chris Russo.
Russo Mizio, here in Fairfield. And I'm back with you, maybe a little bit of deja vu, because this was, I guess maybe it was a year ago. Actually, time's flying. But I'd come before you last year with regards to a text amendment. And this is really, I don't know, Mark, if you had indicated this, but this is kind of like a pre-application, essentially. You just want to kind of get your feedback on it. In 2 weeks, I'm going to P&Z as well to get their feedback on a text amendment to provide off-site below market rate units for a development. If you recall, we were here previously and it was for a fee in lieu of units. So under the zoning regulations, if you have a multifamily project that's over 10 units, you're required to have 10% of those units be designated affordable. And so what the prior application would have done was given the commission an ability to accept a fee instead of taking those units. That was actually the second time we had come through with that regulation. We had come, I think that was 5 or 6 years ago. Deja vu. So the first time we had come, that was really in the beginning, like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund hadn't really gotten off the ground. And there weren't a lot of towns that had done a fee in lieu yet. There wasn't in a lot of regulations. When I came last year, you might recall that a lot of towns do now have fee in lieus. The Housing Trust Fund was, has been running for some years, and so that's why we came forward with that proposal. And if you recall, that would be just for sale units, not for rental units. And you all were here, so I don't know if I really have to get into what the reasoning was behind it, but there's some challenges with for sale units that it could pose to affordable unit owners. So this committee actually made a recommendation to planning and zoning with regards to it. And I met with planning and zoning, and I think, I don't want to speak for them, but the impression I got was certainly a number of commissioners understood those dangers and some of the risks that would be to affordable unit owners. Their concern with the fee in lieu were, I think, some of the concerns that I heard when I was before you as well. And even though, it ended up making a recommendation, I know there were some concerns voiced. And I think some of the main ones were, one, where do you set this fee? It was tough to determine where to set it. I had chosen a percentage of median family income and looking at the other towns, basically, and trying to be conservative with the other towns. I think you all had recommended 300%, was it? 350, or no, it was 350. Yeah, I think it was 350. You're right. And so, but it was somewhat arbitrary. It was really just using in relation to others, and it's tough to pinpoint what would be the right number. I think the other concern with a fee is, okay, so that money would be used to create more units, but would that be a sufficient amount of money? Could we know that would actually be a sufficient amount of money? So for the loss of one unit, and getting a fee instead, would we actually be able to use that money and create another unit? And so that's something I've heard here, but I also heard at the P&Z. And then I think one of the final ones is that the commission would feel more secure knowing we have the unit, and it's not a situation where we have the money and then it's open-ended as to when would we actually get these units? Would it be in a year? Would it be in 2 years? Would it be 3 years? Whereas if we have the unit, we know there's a BMR unit there. So, I think that was some of the trouble that, and one of the reasons that the commission denied that application. So, hearing that, and this was something I had seen in my research in other towns. The other option that they offer is in other towns is finding off-site BMR units. And so I looked at the regulations of other towns. I have to say, some of the other towns, their regulations are pretty bare in describing it, but they offer it. Darien's the one I had looked at, but it didn't really have much in the way of detail. It just says that the commission has the ability to designate off-site BMR units in lieu of the units required in construction, like, again, if it was a 10-unit development or a 15 or a 20 unit development. So basically, I took the reg. A lot of this language is the same as the FEMA. If you compare the two of them, a lot of the language is the same. It's just subbing in that it would be an off-site. The big difference, and this was a bit of a challenge when I was starting out with this, is the commission has always made clear to me that they want to make sure if a development was to be constructed in Southport, that the unit would be located in that area. If there was to be something like that, that it would be in that area. So that was tricky, because it was kind of like, well, how am I going to draw the lines? Is it a radius thing? Do you make it like, it needs to be within 1,000 feet of the site where you're proposing it, or things like that? So that, and it was like, 1,000 feet be enough? So that was one of the tricky parts. But they're going through a new plan of conservation and development at planning and zoning, and they have a map that it just says planning area boundaries. And so they've divided up their POCD. Maybe you've seen the draft POCD, but they are planning based on, for each of these neighborhoods, based on this map. And so when I looked at the map, I said, well, this is probably a pretty good reference point. They are just looking at it now, and they are taking that, they're looking at Greenfield Hill, and they have goals for Greenfield Hill, and then they're looking at Southport, they're looking at the shore area, they're looking at Mill Plain, and they kind of are looking at housing, and they're looking at things in those areas. So the map seemed like it was a good one to reference. And so that's something that's in the proposed amendment. So just to go over kind of the language. Again, this is very similar to the layout of the last amendment, but it says that the commission at its absolute discretion. So if we looked at a development and they said, no, on this one we don't see a problem for affordable unit owners, and that owning a unit here would be difficult. If we don't feel that way, we're going to take the unit. But if they did feel that this was an appropriate development for an offsite, it gives them the discretion to choose this option. And it allows an applicant to designate below market rate units offsite in lieu of constructing the required units on site intended for sale only. So again, it's for sale. There's another line that makes that clear. The next sentence is the off-site BMR unit shall be located in the same planning area as the site as depicted in figure 6 of the POCD. So that's the map that I referenced. And this designation shall not be permitted for dwelling units intended for rental. And then it just basically gives standards where it says an applicant may request to designate these off-site units, and such designation may be approved by the commission if and when the commission determines in its sole and absolute discretion that there are circumstances where the designation would be desirable and in the public interest, and interest of the BMR unit owners. So again, the standard there really is kind of, is this option in the interest of the BMR unit owners? And then in the event that such designation is accepted by the commission, so they review it and they say, okay, we're gonna go off-site BMR units. The restriction on the off-site BMR units has to be recorded on the land records prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the first dwelling unit for the on-site project. The reason for that language is that you couldn't get the designation, we couldn't get them to agree, okay, you're gonna do off-site units, but then not find it and not restrict it. So you're not gonna be able to sell any of your units until the off-site units are selected and it's recorded on land records. To really make sure that, you know, you didn't try to put your stuff before the stuff you're obligated to do with affordable. So that's it. It's an initial draft. One thing I've thought of since drafting it that's not in here is that it should probably be clear you couldn't do you could have a 2-bedroom in the development you're proposing and then maybe go like find a 1-bedroom. I think it should probably have added language here to make sure it's equal, so you didn't, and so somebody didn't try to do something like that. I mean, again, that's something.
Size and quality.
In quality, yeah. In quality, I'll have to think about how you would put that in terms, but yeah, I think that
Ultimately, the planning and zoning would be the final arbiter of whether these are comparable units. I guess the question I would have would be, as a practical matter, how would this really work? You have to have units kind of in hand to offer to the planning and zoning commission at the time in which you're considering this as an option.
yes, but I think what you could also do is if you did find the units and thought they were appropriate units and they matched what you were building, talking about finding quality, you could apply back to the commission and say, would you accept these
So the big
units?
risk for the developers already building something based on the.
Yeah.
I like it also.
I don't know if anybody cares about the thing.
Well, the other issue from a practical matter is if you have the units in hand, or you have to have, it's almost instead of certificate of occupancy, it'd be upon issuance of the building permit, because if you start building something and you get to the very end, you say, oh, I don't have it. What's the town gonna do? Not issue a CO?
I'd be okay with
Until you find it? I mean, there's gonna be unbelievable pressure to issue that CO rather than, and I would think that would be,
Somebody's going really high
if
end.
you're arguing that this would be beneficial to the town, that would be even more beneficial because you get the unit offsite right then and there before these units are actually built. So the town has an added benefit of getting them for a couple of years before the actual units are put into production. So those are my only comments in terms of the logistics of it, because I can see a situation where you go to the commission, you say, hey, we're gonna get this. The commission says, sounds good, let's do it. And then you get to the point that it doesn't materialize. And what are you gonna do? Hold up the CO until you find something? It could be years until you find something comparable. Right? Especially within a.
But then you could,
You're limiting your options.
move forward, you could ask them to just move forward and designate a unit within your development.
Then you would go back and say, I'm sorry, you have to create the unit on site.
Well, yeah, we'll have the unit, one of these units will designate as affordable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have not been able, I want to talk to a couple of the towns and just see their experiences.
You have to come in with a, hey, you're gonna get this. They know exactly what they're getting. It's not some promise that we're gonna find it sometime in the next 18 months while we're building something. It's gonna be comparable. Otherwise, I don't know. It's kind of like buying a pig in a poke, you don't know what you're getting. Right? You guys, what do you think?
Well, I talked to one of the planners, and I'm not sure if it was Darian, I had to check my notes, but he basically said, the option's here, but the commission currently wants the units and doesn't want to pursue it. I personally think it's a nice option to consider. I really do in particular cases, and one that you cited, I think is kind of a textbook case where it would make sense to consider. I realize the political issues associated with,
Right.
we don't want Southport to be the test case for this. So what do you, I'm just wondering if it doesn't put you or your client into a box if we do this, and even beyond the example Mark gave. I mean, there could very well be a situation that would make sense that's in another planning area that you wouldn't be able to use. And I know the Southport one is kind of a salient one, I guess, but just thinking in terms of if maybe there were one that emerged in Stratfield, for instance.
Yeah.
And there wasn't the unit in Stratfield, but maybe the unit was there in Holland Hill, or the unit was there in some part of Southport, because there are some parts of Southport, less Tony than others. I just wonder if it doesn't put maybe you and your client in a little bit of a box.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that's one where they could have flexibility in choosing.
You always go back and amend it again.
And then-
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah, you can always go back and amend
the
it.
district or into sole judgment or something comparable.
Yeah, I mean, this is a nice tool that I think you'd want the commission to be mindful of, that your client would be willing to consider, but not necessarily to mandate this, because I think it might fence you in.
So Chris, how big is the development that this potentially would apply to?
Well, I guess technically you could apply to anything over 10 units, but
Usually shifting.
the one that we have 18. It's 18 units, so it's 18 unit building, so this one's required to have 2. So this person, they would apply and ask for 2. I guess technically, the commission could say, well, we're only gonna do it for 1. I mean, they could do that. But yeah, she would find 2 off-site EMR units. I think it would be a 2-family.
The two in Southport, you could afford that would be the same quality and size. So Herb was saying it kind of puts you in a box, but it's your box too, and so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that would be on the developer. Our thought was, and I talked about this with Jim Wen, is that, one of the nice things is, like, let's say in that example, there's 2 units. If there were a 2-family, and it went 2-family, then, because one of the fears with the original, like the 18 units, is that there would be 2 affordable unit owners, and there would be 16 market rate unit owners. And so the affordable unit owners would be, at a significant disadvantage to all those others. They just, when it comes to voting and things like that, they would be a significant disadvantage. If an offsite was chosen where they weren't, and something like 2-family, it's 100%, so they are in total control of how something like that would be developed. If they wanted to make improvements, it would be in their hands. They would be at a much greater ratio, right? And much greater control. Whereas in the other one, they could get steamrolled, I mean, to put it.
Oh, Brian, sorry.
I think it's very, very well thought out. Thank you. I appreciate all the research. And my 2 cents are that I think that even if you think it's restrictive, right? So like box somebody in, you want it to be that way and then be able to go back the other way and give an allowance rather than have it too loose. In my opinion, but I like the level of detail of putting it to because at the end of the day, capital is going to arbitrage, right? If we didn't have this, you certainly would see, put 10 units in Greenfield Hill, and they're going to go to the cheapest place in town, find a 2-family and bang. So this alleviates that, and I think it also allows, if they're doing like something where it's 500 square foot type of construction somewhere where they're like doing super high end, I don't think you really need to have, I mean, it's an affordable unit, it's affordable to buy, it doesn't, you know, say it's 275 a square foot. That's still pretty daggone nice, but you know, we're not, it would be difficult to pull off like say in a 8 or a 10 sort of thing, or not, whatever, 20 unit place. So I think it can work for both sides.
Say hypothetically, this went on the books. And the situation did occur whereby there wasn't anything readily available in Southport. But there were maybe 4 units for the cost of 2 units in Southport, somewhere else in town.
That's where you've been there before.
So the zoning commission would have the.
So 4 1-bedrooms in lieu of 2 2-bedrooms. Yeah, who knows, but I mean.
I just think, yeah.
That's true, right, yeah.
That's an option that's worth pursuing.
So, and it would still be on the table. This would, you know, they'd have to just say, hey, you know, this is what we found. We want to break ground. We have a contingent offer on these 4 units somewhere else, and
Yeah, then you get more units out of it. Yeah, that's true.
we have to make the decision to say, well, you know, whatever, putting units over, you know, because we have a plan. You have a map. There's how many units do we have in each one of these areas, and are we seeing everything being shoved in one part of town?
And so I mean, and others.
It's kind of neat, and that's where things should end up as we start, you know, having.
I think that's what the commission's trying to respond to. They're trying to make sure that they're more equitably distributed throughout.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It's funny, the only 2 for sale affordable units in town are, right, are.
In Southport.
Are in Southport, yes. Nowhere else is there any other, but.
Well, other than those that.
Where are they?
Oh, okay.
Yes,
The Dunkin' Donuts.
They have 40,
I think it's
35 for sale Deidre Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are
All
town.
Right, so the only 2.
Right, they're in perpetuity.
Okay, yeah.
Right, so, and most of those are in the eastern part of town, but we do have, 22 in the beach area, so it's nice.
Mark, does the commission really want to get involved in deciding that this unit is the same size and quality as that unit?
I don't know, I think at some point, to Chris's point, I think they're gonna have to make some degree of equivalency, it needs to be comparable in some fashion. And I'm thinking more in terms of like, if it's a 2-bedroom unit, you should be creating a 2-bedroom.
Right.
Uh,
Does that play into your points?
was that?
Does that just?
No, bedrooms doesn't, but AMI and frankly, you get more points for rental versus ownership too. So I don't know, it's not just, it's clear that this only applies as an option at the discretion of the commission for a for-sale development. But it doesn't necessarily suggest that, and that would be in the commission's discretion, I suppose, if the applicant is proposing rental units in lieu of the sale units, would the commission consider that? Provided they're in the same general planning district. And there might be a reason that the planning and zoning commission may choose to do that. Maybe there's more of a need at the time for more rental housing.
Still have a portfolio.
And you get more points, I know you get more points for rental housing versus ownership housing for moratorium. So maybe there is a reason that the commission may choose to say, well, I'll take rentals in lieu of the ownership.
Say that again, on the scoring?
Scoring for a moratorium, you get more points for rental than you do ownership. It's a half point more.
I'd love to talk to the folks.
And the reason is, I think that the state believed that it was more difficult to get communities to create rental housing than it was for them to create ownership housing. For the same reason that elderly housing is only worth half of that, and non-age restricted housing is worth a full point. So again, the state was trying to disincentivize communities from just creating age-restricted housing to satisfy.
I get that. That's it's interesting on the
So,
ownership versus rental.
and you obviously get more points strictly for a moratorium for more targeted, lower income thresholds. So a 60% unit is worth more than 80% unit.
It's one of those,
Which makes some,
well, it's one of those cases where I think you have to look,
I don't know,
you have to look at each geographic area and see what really makes sense, because
you know, I don't like we want to necessarily be always thinking about chasing points.
No.
But there might be other reasons that the commission may want to say, I'll take 2 rental units into the terms of the
Is
ownership.
there any, practically, is there any value in a for sale affordable unit? We've got some experience in other parts of town, and you can only sell it at a certain amount, right? And you've got to have a low enough income, and I think you're allowed a 6% increase or an 8% or something.
It depends on.
You don't get the equity bump that we do when you buy a house.
Yeah, well, in order to keep it affordable, there has to be a restriction on sale price. There's a couple ways to do that. The simplest in terms of creating the framework is to base it on income. But that is open to some interpretation because you have to make some assumptions in terms of the interest rate that you're paying on the mortgage, how much down payment, other variables affect that dramatically. So we do have others that have a very specific formula that says you can only go up a certain percent a year or based on CPI, adjusted for homeowner improvements, et cetera, which is capped. So there's a couple different ways to do that. The bigger issue with homeownership is difficult to create for a lot of reasons. But when we have something that's deed restricted for a term, not in perpetuity, if you're the lucky ticket winner at the end of the 40-year restriction, you can then take your affordable unit, go off restriction and sell it marked. That to me seems unfair.
that's why, well,
That's the other thing we.
No,
that's why, well, with a lot of ones,
most of the, as I said, most of the affordable home ownership that we have is permanently deed restricted because it is in essence in trust to the town. The town owns the land, ground leases it to, and they pay taxes on the improvements.
and if you want to go get a Freddie,
If you want to go, it's always deed restricted as affordable.
and Freddie will give you a mortgage with those
We
terms.
have one private development created so far, which has problems, as we all know, for which there are 2 homeownership units. And they're restricted for 40 years. So if you hold out for the 40-year term, at the end of the 40-year term, they convert to market. It just seems not fair. So, one way, this is, again, for the commission to consider it, if you, in that example where you're buying a 2-family, you could convey it to the town, so it would be deed restricted in perpetuity. The town would then be able to ground lease it, and essentially you're taking a 40-year affordable home ownership restricted, beautiful, well-appointed, et cetera, and you're converting it to something that's permanently deed restricted in trust, that's held in trust by the town. That to me is a home run, and if you can deliver the units before anything gets built, you have the benefit of those units for 12 to 18 months sooner than you would have under the normal scenario. So that's a powerful incentive, I think, for the commission to consider that as an option. Those are the only two thoughts. I think the language here is good. I think you summarized it well, which is the more tools that we have in our toolkit, the better off we are. So I think to give the commission some flexibility and some discretion, whether they choose to exercise it or not, is generally a good thing.
So, Mark, I agree, but I would give them more flexibility, as you were just talking about, rather than a ownership structure, maybe it's a 2-family house someplace else, we get 2 units instead of 1. And I would encourage that we find a way to take a fee, that we give the commission as many options as possible.
Yeah, well, most Chris has done research, I have as well. Most communities that do have an inclusionary zoning and an alternative compliance plan provide both. If you go you're gonna provide offsite, you generally allow for fee in lieu. Sometimes you have just fee in lieu by itself, but oftentimes you have all three options, and the commission can pick and choose. The concerns that Chris articulated are ones that we've talked about here with the fee in lieu, the commission has talked about, because, it goes into the housing trust. Who knows when they actually get deployed, they actually create the units. So, but again, that's really for the commission to decide. I don't know that we necessarily should dissuade the commission from having a lot of different options for them to decide what's in the best interest of the town. So.
Stanford actually you can at times do both.
Yeah.
It's in the way they do the ratios, it will come out to a percentage, it'll come out to
Very
like 2.6. The number will come out to 2.6, and what they'll let you do is give 2 units, but then the 0.6 you pay for.
Right.
So they get both the units and money. So
Norwalk does, they require 60% units, but if you do 80%, you can do that, but you have to pay a fee on top of the units. So there's different ways to slice it, but Stanford and Norwalk have very complicated, as you've seen, I've passed out the regulations from each. They're more complicated, obviously, but they have created more units too. So.
What stops them from being 2 blighted units? Like for what how do you get
I think
confirmed?
that's why you'd have to have the units to be able to show what they're
So
getting.
there is an assessment of quality at some point.
You would have to.
It's the discretion of the committee, or it's just because it's in there, doesn't.
Yeah, go find it, and come back to us later. Sounds like, I suppose they could, but that's a lot of risk for the developer too.
no, but the scenario I was thinking was if you got approved, you would come back and you weren't granted
Must be conditional.
and then, so you would just so for instance, you would go get an 18-unit approval, it's all approved.
Yeah.
But then you could come back and reapply then and say, oh, wait a second, I found 2 units off site, here they are, so you can show, because I agree with you. I don't think the commission would agree to it without you having the units in the agreement.
I mean, in the case that you're bringing up, obviously the project has been approved. So that they come out and say, hey, we've got these units. Or even if a project was new, just got approved, they'd still have probably 6 to 9 months while they're getting their construction documents and financing. Identify something, come back and say, hey, we want to swap these out, would you consider this appropriate? So, yeah, it would work that way.
Can I ask a question? I don't mean to interrupt, here. Was this text amendment drawn up by John Fallon? No?
I don't think so.
Because I had read something about involving him as far as a text amendment. And also, I want to know, you referenced an 18 unit development before. Is that the one on Stilson Road?
No, he would.
Pequot Avenue? Okay, all right.
Yeah, it was a permanent road. Yeah, it's been.
Just, I don't know if the difference between affordable housing and 830G are 2 totally different things, right?
Well, A3G, set aside developments do qualify as affordable housing. What we're trying to do is create strategies for us to determine where best to build affordable housing in lieu of having set aside developments rammed down our throats. So,
Yeah, and that's my concern about this. And if I'm off base or off topic here, please let me know and I'll shut my mouth. But the 18-unit condo development for Stilson Road, it was originally 19. I think it contains 1 affordable or whatever it is.
It would be 2.
Me too, it'd have to be 2.
Oh, it'd be 2, okay.
It has to be 2.
So what is considered affordable in the town of Fairfield?
Well, it's a complicated algorithm, John, and I think if you went to the affordable housing plan, which is on the town's website, I'm actually got a copy of this right, it all lays it out right there. And I would suggest you take a look at that.
Yeah, that's available at the,
It's right on the website, right on the town website. I think if you do that and you come back to us with any kind of questions we had, probably easiest if we took those offline. But it lays it all out here and in describing the goals of what the committee's trying to do over the next 5 years too, which are basically twofold. One is make progress toward getting freedom, the moratorium from the 830G law. But secondly, to create more housing units for people that need them. But I'd suggest that you go to that document, get a real grounding in terms of what affordable housing is, how it's defined, and how the mechanics work.
What is the name of the document?
It's the 2022 to 27 Affordable Housing Plan. And it's on the town website.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just I've been living here since 1999. I'm from New York originally, and I really love Fairfield, and I'm just concerned with the overdevelopment in the town as far as traffic congestion and safety. And this one particular development is basically up the street from me. It's very close to one of the busiest intersections in town.
We're very familiar with it.
Yeah. And I just want to say I attended all the wetlands hearings on that because I do have wetland property that could be affected by this. And so, I have concerns about that. And so, all right, just to sum it all up, and then I'll probably leave. But so 2 of the units are considered out of the 8. It was originally 19.
Yeah.
You cut it down to, you
Yeah, but
eliminated.
it doesn't change, whether it was 19 or 18 or it was 11, it would be 2.
Under the
They're stuck in it.
There's under the inclusionary, we have an inclusionary zoning regulation that requires for any development over 10 units, 10% would have to be set aside as
Right.
at or below 80% of the area median income. Okay. And the area median income for this area right now for a family of 4, it's 117,100. The area, that's the area. The state's. So it's adjusted based on the number of people in a household. So if you have a 1-person household, it's lower than that to qualify. If you have more people than 4, then it's higher. And then the rents have to be not more than 30% of that income.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be better for me to come to the TPZ hearing when if it gets approved by the Wetland Commission, attend that hearing, speak out. I have concerns about that.
And the whole town, the plan of conservation and development, which is always sort of the vision for the master plan in a sense for the town is being updated. And that's another opportunity for you to weigh in, and a public hearing will be held once that draft comes out shortly.
Right.
But let us know if you've got any specific questions about the plan. A lot of work went into this, and we want to get as much feedback as we can.
I'm gonna write this down because I'm 72 years old and my memory, as soon as I dig out my pen here.
Oh, is that one?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So that's called what again, is that?
Affordable housing plan.
Affordable housing plan.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing plan. If you go to the website, just
Okay.
then you'll find it.
All right. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I'm gonna
Good job, thanks.
say good night to all. It was nice to meet you.
Come back anytime.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Is there anything else?
No, that's great feedback, so I appreciate it. Again, we're on the beginning steps here of this, the P and Z, the 23rd, I think, the 2 weeks. Just a pre-app. So same as this, to get their feedback, comments, then I would submit in that application, where I would read back, for you again, and then I would go to P and Z with the fee report. And I appreciate the sober look at it and thinking of that it needs flexibility, because I want to be very sensitive that it didn't feel like, because I am representing a private, client, that we're trying to pull a fast one. And that's why I tried to make it, that there's not a situation where you could stick it somewhere that's maybe part of where land values are lower, or that you could change the level of units. So I want politically as well, just want to be sensitive to that. So I appreciate you.
It's just
wise.
It's wise on your part because we.
This will be my third time. Thank you all.
I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
I didn't.
Okay.
So let me just go through my thoughts again.
Oh,
So I think that we need a fee in lieu, and I think off-site housing is good. And I think at the commission's discretion, it shouldn't be limited to the neighborhood. As we tried before, we were looking, I think this was another.
yeah, you can always make it easier, less restrictive, and the commission could do that at its discretion, I think, but he's probably, I think it's almost a non-starter if he comes in without having some geographic limitation to this at this point. Based on what I heard at that public hearing, I don't think it's happening.
They certainly don't want to make the test case for this.
Yeah. They're not, he's not gonna come in with a development, where he's got 2 units over on the eastern side of town and blow up something in Southport. It's just not gonna happen.
That's the way most code and law is, right? There's the letter and the intent. So you're stating in it the way you described it. The intent is to do that, and if it isn't, then that's when you have that discussion. So, I mean, I like the way I did it well. It's the way to go about it.
I hear you right, Steve, you're okay with being now?
He was before, but the price was all messed up.
There was some bias as a result of circumstances for Steve.
I did.
I have a
Also, the
question.
number was too low.
I think I get it, but what's the benefit to the developer?
Well, let's look at, in the case of,
It all comes down to
in the case that you just presented,
economics, right?
let's say,
What's the benefit?
I think he outlined a specific proposal. In
Right.
that case, let's say he found a 2-family in Southport that he could buy.
Right.
Let's say he paid $750 for it.
Right.
It's not too bad
Right.
compared to what he would
Right,
have
oh
to
yeah,
pay
absolutely,
for these units that he could sell for $2 million.
right,
As part of this development. So, that's maybe the cheaper way out for him.
right, but I would be
How many,
worried
but how
about-
many 2-families are there in Southport?
Right.
So then, I think to Herb's point, are you being so restrictive? But I do think under what I heard at the last hearing, I don't think, maybe they have something in mind already to look at something. But
Potentially, you could have one area that now becomes really overdeveloped, right? Or because on one hand, I sort of like the idea that you have to stay within the same section, right?
Well, I don't think it would be any more developed than it would, because you'd have to first have an approved development in order to substitute off-site. So you already have.
So you're not creating.
You're not creating new.
Okay,
Change the zoning.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm glad
Yeah.
I asked. Thank you.
I think, what they're gonna, it's not new construction, they would buy an existing unit
Right,
or units and say, I'm gonna swap this out. I do see some, under that scenario, even though he would come out maybe better off financially, I do see some benefits to the town, particularly if you can get them earlier than you would ordinarily, and you can get them in perpetuity. As the town owns the land, it's given to the town.
That's a great point, I think.
If we go the land trust mechanism, which makes more and more sense the more we go down this, that's where all the stuff lies, because the town doesn't, it should sit in a trust, right? It's a public trust, whatever the town oversees, or whatever, has people on the board. But the perpetuity thing that's the way it should be designed, and and the ground lease mechanisms should all sit there, it's the way we're done.
Yeah, we have, in essence, a land trust now. The town acts as the trustee.
It's just not
The
legal.
issue that we have with that mechanically is that the town is not a nimble body.
It's not
So it's very difficult. Every time the town acquires property, disposes of property, it needs to be blessed by at least 3 different boards. And that's gonna take, 60 to 90 days to go through that process. If you had a redevelopment agency that act, or some kind of land trust that was independent of the town, that had a board that would approve that, you could move quicker.
And
But somebody has to give that,
even with it,
where you get into it is, somebody has to give that group the authority up front, and they have to have funding to make it happen.
and that nonprofit entity would have its own board and bylaws. So the other problem with the governance structure now is like, yeah, it's cumbersome. And also, you're not, it could all be undone. Whereas if you put it within a trust structure that's set up the way I'm describing, just like with the pension, you can't go back and take the pension money out, right? Once it's in there, those assets. Same
I
with
suppose you could,
Same with the
that could be
PCA.
done if the town decided to dispose of property, but then it's also equally cumbersome that way too. Because you'd have to get the approval and blessing of at least 3 different separate boards, and right now, you have a ground lease to people that goes for 99 years, so I don't know how you unwind or unring that.
Well, the intent in putting stuff, I mean,
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian, it would be helpful to have another option other than the town being the owner and trustee. But we do have, in essence, a land trust now, because that's how it works.
But Mark, when we helped pass the inclusionary zoning, why did we say 40 years rather than life of the unit or perpetuity?
I think we were just trying to mimic the language in 830G, but I think, you know, we do have an option to change it.
and 830G, it's because the commercial leases, they're mostly, leases and, you go do a commercial real estate loan, right? You're gonna get a 10,
I will say that the state,
30, 40,
if you wanna get credit for the units, you do need to reference not less than 40 years. You need to have 40 years somewhere in that language. Otherwise, the state, if it just leaves it kind of vague for the life development, the state won't consider that compliant.
because even some of the, like
Even
even
life development could be 20 years, you know?
and even CHFA, they do that. It's like it's a loan, but it becomes a recoverable or non-recoverable grant after. So in other words, you keep it affordable for 40 years, and they'll just extinguish the debt and say,
As you can see, that's why I put it in that spreadsheet. So I think you do have an option, and I think that would be something we should consider.
yeah.
Including that in our language, in our we do have proposed text amendments.
Yeah. That's what I was doing.
That. And, the other thing that came up, we talked about that in relation to the bonus unit, the text amendment we were considering for the bonus. You would ask, can we make that longer than 40 years? Not as a condition of our support, but we'd like to see that. And so I did talk to the developer and said, if we were to propose language like this, would you find that acceptable? And basically, his attorney said, if that's what you're asking for, we will maybe incorporate that in our proposed language. So I think that's, now when I mentioned that to our friend, the 4-unit development on,
I'm down by
he
the.
was a little, yeah,
By,
wasn't so sure about that. Again, if you put it in the language, everyone has to, they now understand the rules of the road. You're not making it up as you go. It's not discretionary. This is what it requires. So I think that would be a good change that we should consider.
So the next item I think we have is
The inclusionary zone.
yeah, so I guess to sort of frame this, where we are with the POCD. So I corresponded with Emmeline, and she said that perhaps as early as the end of July. But I'm thinking of draft, but I'm thinking that it may go beyond that. And then the next step would be to have a public hearing. So there would be at least one public hearing. There would be at least one public hearing.
He's trying to get through a sentence here.
So here's the big picture. So perhaps conceivably as early as the end of this month, but I'd say more likely August, there will be a draft that's presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They will arrange a public hearing, and there will be at least one public hearing to address this draft. We don't know at this point when that will take place. Just reading the situation and making a reasonable judgment, I think Mark and I would guess more likely not before September.
Yeah.
That public hearing or first public hearing will take place. That's an opportunity for everyone, including the Affordable Housing Commission, members of the commission, members of the public, to weigh in terms of their thoughts on the POCD draft. Once this process is completed, then they would then move on to a review of zoning regulations once the vision statement, the master plan is developed. There are several areas that we clearly have a major stake in as far as the POCD is concerned. And we've outlined several of those in the agenda: inclusionary zoning, parking, and also middle housing. So I think where we want to be is in a position to provide input at the right time. And right now, we were not planning on having an August meeting. So our next meeting would be September, but we want to position ourselves to really be in a position to provide feedback, to act, and so I think one of the points tonight was, at least for inclusionary zoning, to identify what additional information we need to capture to position ourselves to take a position on that as a group or individually if we chose to do that. So to that end, Mark put together this very nice chart with a lot of good backup information on inclusionary zoning. And we'll talk about the other two items as well, but I think maybe we'll lead with the inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, so we did talk to a couple other communities that don't have, we asked Stratford. Inclusionary Milford, inclusionary. So we focused primarily on these communities that we knew of within Fairfield County that have fairly well-developed regulations around this particular area. And as you know, this is kind of a summary, and we put it together initially to look at that fee in lieu option. So, kind of ignore the far right-hand column, if you will. But, we went back and looked at, term of affordability, and as Steve mentioned, a couple of the regulations do provide for the life of the unit, whatever is longer. Most with they're targeting the 80% AMI as are we, but there are some that will target 60% AMI. And Stanford allows substitution with a complicated formula that says an 80% unit is worth this much, as a 60% unit worth as much as a 40% unit. So there's an incentive, or at least provide some flexibility for developers to mix and match, provide a mixed income development. But you also notice, like the threshold, our trigger is at 10 units or more. We've had some unfortunate experience with 9-unit developments and subdivisions. That was not unexpected. I think when we were crafting it, we were obviously thinking that there would be some folks that would try to avoid that. But you notice that in other communities, that threshold is much lower. Notably in our suburban brethren, Ridgefield, Darien, and Keenan, they're all at 4 or 5 units that triggers this. We were at 10% as a required set aside. Again, those communities are at 14, 15%. So, and they do allow for some relief from density and parking, FAR, height, other things that the commission can consider to make developments more feasible financially. And they also provide for either a fee or off-site development in many cases. So I think this gives us a lot to chew on from my perspective, the things that you can all read the regulations, is why I appended them. I tried to summarize them the best I can. Some are very straightforward and clear, I think. They're very basic. Others are very complicated. Stanford and Norwalks are pretty complicated regiments. But as many of you have read regulations before, it seems crystal clear on paper from one interpretation doesn't always hold. So sometimes there are subtle nuances in terms of how these regulations are interpreted and applied. And so it might be, the two steps that would make me feel more comfortable would be talking individually to the planner or zoning specialist or housing specialist in each of the 5 communities and making sure that our interpretation of the regs is accurate. And then secondly, I think the other question I think we wanted to ask was, to what extent, it's great to have regulations on paper, but how effective have they been in terms of actually creating units? So part of the concern that we've discussed here is if you set the threshold too high, the set aside requirement too high, especially in the current interest rate environment and construction costs being what they are, will you kind of turn off any development? We want to make sure that developers who have an incentive to actually develop, they can make money on these things. But we also want to make sure we're getting a fair, getting some public benefit out of it as well. So will it still pencil out at 14, 15%? I think we want to make sure that we have some understanding of that. And, we can go through some of the analysis ourselves and see whether we think they would work out. A lot of it is, but when you put numbers into a spreadsheet, it's all based on the assumptions. How much am I paying for the land? Construction costs, you probably have a pretty good handle on right now, but land, depending on where it's situated, can vary. So I would go back and just ask, how many units have you created under this, if any? And, is our interpretation of these regulations accurate? And I think we can accomplish that by September. And, we should be then in a position to recommend some changes. The other thing I think we've been holding out here is assuming that the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted a POCD, at some point, then we could have maybe the opportunity to meet with them, as Chris has done, like an informal pre-app, sound them out. We call it a workshop, but it would be helpful to do that. And I don't know if there's, rather than just spring it out and hope for the best, so I don't know how quickly we want to move on it, but that would be the only other thing we could consider.
I would say getting this information earlier rather than later. I know I always say this. It's probably to our advantage in that maybe we could be ready when that possible window opened, when the commission would be willing to meet with us. But I think getting to them earlier rather than later would be a good thing. I'd also say, Mark, we were individually gathering information for some of these towns over the last 2 years.
Yep.
So for instance, Bob had spoken with Milford, Steve had spoken with Westport, I'd spoken with Darien, and we did capture some information. I'm sure I can't vouch for it to the extent I think we can vouch for your information now, in part because there were probably some inferences that we made in the way we captured it. Some of it was captured verbally in discussions. But we did get some information in terms of how many units have been constructed. But it's not clear, you know, what the date of these inclusionary percentages were in all cases. So while we have some information that might be useful for you to have, or whoever goes back to these towns to have, I think we do need to get that validation.
I think Westport was the only one that has been mentioned here, and I've looked on their regs, regulations a couple of times and couldn't find the inclusionary provisions in it. So either they have it well worded, or I could not find it. It's
I
really-
found it.
Yeah, we have some information. I mean, Steve, for instance, said this.
So I would,
20%.
it'd be great to add Westport to the mix here. So
We can probably give you a thing.
do you have the regs?
Yeah, well, the regs, no, I have a citation to the regs, oh, I think. Section 39A is the 39A. That's the inclusionary housing overlay district, which I think produced no use. And they have a workforce zone. That's good. I can just send you this.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the regs.
Yeah.
And maybe we didn't include those initially because it it was more like overlay. Like that would be if Fairfield only had like the TOD overlay zone where inclusionary zoning was required.
So let me send you the
Other ones
ones
are
now.
townwide. or
I'll
city.
highlight the ones that I thought were applicable.
But we had some, gives it some substantive information on Westport, Shelton.
We'll be seeing Shelton soon, right?
What we're seeing Shelton, so we can ask them, we could also ask, what about the original, but that'll be a chance to maybe confirm the information, so. Okay. And the other one was Milford, we got some.
Yeah, I've talked to a bunch of people in Wilford, like, or have knowledge. Inclusionary zoning is not something that they have as far as obviously. I couldn't find it, so if I could find the regulations, I incorporate it. So maybe it's again, well,
On your spreadsheet, you've got for us the fee in lieu at 250.
yeah, I think that was based on the proposed that he proposed.
But I felt the
Yeah,
last.
I ran it at 352.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that better.
So don't, yeah.
David Fairfield, which others higher.
Yeah, I can always modify that. I was just showing how
Just try to slide something by.
low it was in comparison to other rates.
Yeah.
I also thought that we might want to use the 370% as the multiplier for Norwalk, the apples to apples here. It's two cases, it's whether they're 80% or 60%, right?
Yeah, it's, and I think I applied, did I apply 60 is 370 or 60 is 270?
60 is, it's 10% if you're 80, right? So it says.
No, I think there is, it's 60%. And if you do 80%, you have to pay into a fee, you pay a fee in addition. So here too, they have different percentages in different areas of town. So there's CBD and Sono, I guess, considered their transit-oriented development overlay districts. It's 12%. It's 10% everywhere else. But then, if you're doing 80%, you have to pay an additional 1%.
Okay, so that's.
Into the trust fund to do an 80% unit. So they're really targeting 60%. But to your point, I need to make sure that the multiplier is based on their targeted AMI 60%. I thought I did that, but maybe I didn't. It is walk in Stanford takes a little bit of reading
Yes.
to get through.
Yes.
Job security.
This is great.
Is there anything else that you think other than Westport? And we could talk to Shelton, see them, but I don't think they have, I think they negotiate these things. I don't think they have a townwide inclusionary zoning regulation.
Is there anything with Greenwich?
I don't think so, but we can just check.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't think there's a way we're gonna get on the
Well, I did, now I'm gonna select Fairfield County towns, so it's really,
yeah, I
yeah.
think that's right. It's outside of the scope, so, yeah, I think this is great. So it really helps. Thanks.
So, yeah, so we'll do that. Talk to the staff. Maybe we'll see a few of them at our workshop coming up next week. Stuff.
So we've got two other items, that parking and middle housing.
Well, from and Bob's done excellent work. I apologize for sending out a dated link. I'll make sure that the most recent updated with all the, he did another series of flyovers and incorporated those data points into the updated report. So I'll upload that to the site. I was explaining to Bob earlier, I have kind of a limit in terms of my file size. So I've been trying to send out links as opposed to attaching documents where I can, especially for multi-megabyte files. And I've been mailing a copy of probably the wrong one, the old one, to some prominent property owners here whose properties we analyze, right? So I sent a copy to Ken Gleeman. I sent a copy to the gentleman who owns the former Bob's Shopping Plaza, where Restoration Hardware Outlet is. And I also provided a copy to Mike Berkowitz, who owns the property where Kohl's used to be, which is now Aldi and Floor and Decor. And in each case, shared the information, invited them, said happy to meet, and share our findings and talk through what we're thinking about. And so Mike was one of the first. I mean, I did get a positive response from all, but I am scheduled to meet with Mike Berkowitz tomorrow. I think Bob will join me to answer any questions about the analysis. And the idea was to really present it to some of the properties that would be affected to make sure that they're comfortable with our analysis and our recommendations, and that they would be supportive of it. Because if they're not, then I don't know that we would get too far in proposing a text amendment to the Planning and Zoning Commission. But I think so far the feedback I've gotten has been positive. So I would hope to continue to share that with property owners. We also shared it with several other, at least one other board commission, the Economic Development Commission, which was impressed with the work. Didn't really have anything really to add, I think, even though we invited them. But so I think that's the next step, which is to put forth, finalize a text amendment. And again, maybe if we had the opportunity to workshop it with the Planning and Zoning Commission, it would be helpful.
And part of that analysis, we addressed this at an earlier meeting, I shared an 11 town analysis comparison of where they are with their off-street commercial property, off-street parking regulations. And what we're recommending is in line with the current draft of the OCD. That's really one space for each four per thousand rather than 5 per thousand. It's a pretty modest recommendation. Also, though, as part of the analysis I did, and we covered this in the prior, the same 11 towns in terms of some of their residential off-street parking requirements. Today in East End, we have required more parking for multifamily. And the suggestion of the text amendment would just be to make it two spaces for each expand it, regardless of whether it's one unit or triplex or, you know, so I have that data as well. I think that would be something that would be probably very minimal to staff current POCD, and just to tighten that up.
Step in the right direction.
It's a step, I mean, it's modest, it's incremental, but, you know, it's a start. And so we're prepared, I mean, I have that analysis, we have it, I have it full for text amendment, right? As time comes, if that's what they're looking for. I think they want the POCD though, to be more broad-based, and, you know, they're gonna be, they're looking at making changes to the zoning regs, obviously. But my sense, listening to all the sessions, has been, they want to consider this, study that, explore this, and keep it very gentle, the language. So that's the impression I get from the commission. I don't know if staff shares that opinion. I think want to be less specific and more gentle.
I think a planning document that's intended to serve a life of 10+ years probably should not be overly prescriptive or specific, because you don't know what you don't know. So I think, yeah, you can point in a general direction, but I think the details probably need to be worked out.
So as we provide input for the POCD, I don't know if we have to provide text drafts. That may be too detailed.
For the POCD, I think it is, but we're hoping that they'll land the POCD and then we can proceed with text amendments. So, although I suppose we don't have to necessarily wait.
Ready, I mean, we can share it with them and then they can decide how far they want to go with the POCD, but at least they know directionally which way we'd like to see them go when they get to the zoning regs. And then middle housing.
Have that proposed text amendment, so I need to just circle back with them and see what their timing is.
We get a one with the bonus here. And the good thing is, there is a flexible statement that's within the POCD draft that in addition to some specific liberalization of zones that will be modified from A to B, or I think A to C, there's also a statement that there would be a study of middle housing. More generic statement, which I think we like to see because it gives us the hope for more potential liberalization that would enable us to maybe build more units. And there will be an increasing demand as people look for other housing options as they age.
We've also looked at minimum lot size, making some suggestions there in B and C as it pertains to multifamily with data to back it up. So I think we've got some,
Yeah, and hopefully that's something we can talk about with the,
exactly.
with the TPC, if we have that also.
We've got a size. We know how many probably. I think we're a good place to go.
I will mention that we have the benefit of having a very capable intern at planning and zoning who is very adept at GIS and is looking for additional spatial analysis to be performed. We have other data needs.
Well, one of the things I've been thinking about and started to do a deeper dive, picking up where we left off in the town properties, trying to really property by property assess its potential and the abutting adjacent properties. And that's, 300 and some odd parcels. So, get some of that. And mapping that out so you could see visually. So it's a good example of that because the parcel that's town owned by Berkeley, there's that overflow parking that used to be outdoors on Greenfield. That was, so also multifamily, or fountain, like Greenfield. So looking at that neighborhood by neighborhood or where the town-owned properties kind of congregate and what's in the surrounding vicinity adjacent, it's interesting. I'm only about a third of the way through that. That may suggest additional.
Here for a limited time, but she's looking for additional work.
How many more hours you got?
I don't know about the hours. I think it's more that she has to go back to school. So we may have her for another, 3-4 weeks, 4 weeks or so. But I know that she has plowed through all of our outstanding data requirements. And so planning and zoning staff said, hey, if you have anything else that you're looking to map, mentioning it because I know we've talked about some things here. She's working on an affordable housing map, updating our map of affordable housing inventory. So don't have to answer it now. I just want to see if we have specific requirements. We need to at least set up a meeting and talk through those. So
I saw one article just recently with respect to studies being undertaken of how land might be used that would be that's partially flood exposed. But in other words, the idea would be using part of parcels for middle housing. It's a middle housing article that the AARP put out. I just following up on Bob's thought, I wonder if she might look at these town parcels that maybe are at least partially committed to some other use for potential readaptation in part.
well, I guess it starts maybe just with just having a better handle on town's assets inventory. So, and then I don't know if that would lend itself to GIS, but I mean, I suppose we could look at that. Anyway, as we were talking through the middle housing piece, I was remembering, she did look at an analysis of 15,000 square foot lots. And then we were talking about, lots that are 9,000 and less than 9,000. So again, there's some opportunities there to maybe map that out.
I guess it just seems that the land is so dear here that we need to be mindful of how each of these town assets is deployed and whether there's some portion of that that could be potentially readapted, repurposed. And, certainly the Greenfield Street is a great example of doing that. But maybe there are other examples where we just need to think out of the box and having GIS tools like this that can really zero in and help us to understand those assets better might be useful.
What's surprising to me is that, there are, some of the data, there's 139 town-owned properties in districts A, double A, triple A. So that's kind of, I think she should look at B and R3. And there's about 100. Being able to do something.
Would it have to be public water, public sewer?
Well, there's more likely that in B, you're gonna have more.
Yeah, we had looked at B.
Yeah.
And we had specifically looked at Bs that were public water and public and sewer.
Sorry, I didn't want to get us off on a tangent there. I just
It's
think about it.
Yeah, I think anything else on those areas that fall with the umbrella of POCD, the inclusionary zoning with the middle housing or the parking, before we move on to the whole business? Anybody? whole business?
Still waiting COs on the two projects that we referenced last month, 528 545 Park Avenue. Other than that, for the most part, the moratorium application is pretty well complete. Waiting those COs and then, a couple finishing touches, and then it has to be noticed. So it's kind of the last call to developers to file applications.
But you have to put
We have
forth
to-
a public notice.
Yes, we do. Notify our intent to apply for a moratorium. And give everyone kind of a last call.
Mhm.
And then it goes up and, actually you can file, it just gives them a, kind of a warning on the process. And then the housing department, we're trying to do our best to make this as easy for the Department of Housing to review as is possible. They asked us to create a digital file. We're in the process of creating a digital file that they can sort through and find the information they're looking for. And we're providing it in the detail that they're asking. So hopefully, their review will be expedited by our providing that. On the other hand, there's a lot of documents to go through. Because it's not like we have 4 projects. It's like, we're gonna have like,
3 months, or how long did Mike Santoro take to go through this?
it's gonna be a multi-month process, I think. They do have a time window to complete their review, at the end of which they have to then notice their intent to issue it. Which is again, subject to a public comment period, and then they go final. So it's about a 6-month process from the moment we file to when we might potentially get.
So the developer who's not ready yet, you notice it first, and he knows he's got 6 months to get things, and then
It's the way it works, unfortunately. Nothing we can do about it.
So if you were handicapping roads, they're also. If you were handicapping the time on, say, when you expect the COs to get?
Looks like, I just talked to the developer for Park. And they're intending to begin pre-leasing this month with the idea that they'll have their CO by September 1.
it starts pretty soon.
So we're talking probably, and I'm not sure what the deal is with Camerata and 528 Black Rock. It's been kind of at the end process here now for a long time. So we'll just have to circle back with him and get that in. But
So let's say we hope to get the COs by September.
maybe 6 months beyond that.
6 months beyond that, well,
So we're talking about early next year.
in terms of actually
Getting it.
So once you have the COs, you're basically ready to go in terms of.
Yes.
Of the.
Yep, we need a couple of documents. I need an opinion letter from council. We've drafted a lot of the language. We drafted the letter of transmittal from the first selectman. We drafted the public notice. We drafted all the attestations and affidavits and everything that goes with it.
Nice
So
job.
it's ready to go. It just has to be finalized. People have to sign it. We do have to get the opinion letter from Attorney Pierce, but I've told him that we need that. And so I think we'll file, we should be ready to file immediately after that CO.
Awesome.
Everything that we can control, we're trying to expedite.
Oh my gosh, St. Emery's back up.
What's that?
St. Emery's?
It's there. The issue has been, frankly, the priest of that particular parish, he blows hot and cold in terms of his interest and desire to sell. And, even when Carol was out with the appraiser doing an appraisal, and he excused himself because he was showing the property to somebody else. So, it's just like, there's stuff that goes on.
But Marvin control the process, isn't it, like the bishop?
Apparently, he controls it enough that we've talked to the real estate people at the diocese, and they answer to him somehow. I don't understand it, frankly, myself,
Right.
but he's got some control over the asset. That's not, maybe the Pope can command something different, I don't know, but we're working our way up the channel. But I keep Carol engaged. I mean, she's very interested in the property. I think it would be good for us. I mean, clearly, her development scenario there is much less dense than other scenarios that a private developer would do. It would be 100% affordable or very close to it. So I think, and she's got the money commitment from DOH. So we just need to get the church to sell us the property or sell her the property. Sale lease back. Or sale or lease it. And I just need to get now a ground lease back to the Board of Selectmen. We do have possession. We don't have possession. We do have title to all the properties. We have a holdover tenant one, and the former homeowner has not been technically dispossessed of his property, so he's still there. We're obviously trying to work with him to find other accommodations for him. So, and the nice thing, once we get a ground lease for that, there's really, as you know, there's 2 conforming duplex building lots across the street, and then there's 3 lots that are together. And so the 2 conforming duplex building lots, with the presentation of a building permit application and plans, they can pull a building permit and just build a duplex, and we're good to go. We don't need anything beyond that. So the idea would be, once we finish up Greenfield Street, they would then go to those 2 units. It fits really well with their model because Habitat.
That would be awesome.
Are you still talking to the owner of 254?
We are. So we just need to get the appraisal completed and then get back to him with a he wasn't in a rush. He just said, make me an offer that was reflective of fair market value. Seemed reasonable. So
You think Habitat can do something in parallel?
yeah, I do. I mean, they're obviously building two duplexes now.
Yeah.
I think they could probably do 2 at Parkview, and then when we get Greenfield, they can go back there if we're not ready to move ahead with the other side of the Greenfield, Parkview Commons.
So they could probably do something in Parkview and something at Greenfield in parallel.
Yeah, I think so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a slow process because they do rely upon volunteer labor. So as they said, it's the most inefficient way to build a house, but it is a very community-minded project. So I do think, and there's no question that we couldn't provide the level of affordable home ownership opportunity with. They're providing a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at no interest for these folks. So you can really provide a quality starter home opportunity for people. I mean, it's just amazing.
And is it affordable 40 years or in perpetuity?
Yeah, again, these are all, we own the property, ground leasing it for $1 a year to Habitat, successor in title, our successor in, the lease. And so it's essentially will be held in trust. The only issue is when we go acquire more property to do it this way, it's not great. So, and we have the meeting with our counterparts in Shelton, Ridgefield, and what was the other? Danbury?
Danbury.
So the 4 communities selected for the technical assistance capacity building grant were Ridgefield, Danbury, Fairfield, in Shelton. And we're meeting next week at Fairfield University. Each community has a 4-person delegation. Herb from Affordable Housing, Jim Ramalai from Planning and Zoning, me, staff, and then the first selectman or mayor designee. So the idea is to share best practices. There might be a little bit more sharing on our part, given our colleagues, but you never know, we might learn some cool
Is it open to the public?
I don't think so. No. But we'll report back and get you inside information. And the only other, well, our trust fund is $855,000 as of 6/30. We don't have, there is, the opportunity on Greenfield Street to acquire that property, but we haven't, we don't know what that price is gonna be yet. And then, as I think I reported to you last time, we did have a motion or a resolution to look at whether to allocate housing trust fund dollars to acquire or help acquire a portfolio of 5 duplexes. And that fell through, and the owner reached out and said, would the town have, we did talk to the housing authority passed. And he said, would the town have any interest in buying it? Of course, our estimate of what that cost would be, and we were just looking at there are 3 lots that are congregated together on a cul-de-sac. Unfortunately, they're not contiguous. They have lots in between. But we were intrigued by the 3 properties. And we thought the cost would be about, we didn't make an offer, but we thought the cost would be upwards of $1.4 million for these 3 duplex properties. We don't have $1.4 million. So as a practical matter, I didn't think that would be, I didn't see us like going to the town boards and asking for them to appropriate money with this kind of half formulated plan as to what we're gonna do with it. So we,
Purchase money mortgage from the seller. Give him
yeah, but
$500,000.
the town is not gonna do that.
No, but the trust fund, we've got 500,000 out of the 850.
Yeah, but I have to get the Board of Selectmen to approve this as a town aid. I don't see the town entering into this agreement with the seller for this.
I think you could be creative and you could
And
find.
plus, I have to then present this to the 3 boards that I mentioned before as to what is the plan. And we don't have really a plan. Other than we think that it'd be great, really cool idea to own these 3 properties. Possibly we might be able to acquire the other 2 in between at some point, but now that we've announced it publicly, the price just went up. And so it just didn't seem feasible. So I did reach out to, when Carol passed, I reached out to Connecticut Housing Partners. We had a conference call today. It's not unexpectedly interesting opportunity, but it's too risky for us. We don't, same issue, because they don't, until they understand what, if we had an acre to put together, they can redevelop, that's one thing. But 3 properties, you have to assemble other things, you know what the time is, you have to carry it. So, long story short, we do have another private investor we've worked with before and says, hey, would you help me finance this? I might want to buy all 5 and put it into the program. What do you think? And we're going to talk to them, and maybe at some point we'll come back to you with something. But again, the concern that we have is allocating a significant portion of the housing trust fund for this, which you don't have for in perpetuity, like, if the town were to buy property and put it into trust in essence, or if you work with the housing authority or Connecticut Housing Partners, it's in perpetuity. So it was fine. We were using community development block grant dollars. We were using about, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. We had a 40-year declining balance loan, because that's kind of equivalent to what we've been doing in rehab. But when you're talking like $300,000-$400,000 for the whole thing, I don't know. So I may come back at some point, but those are my concerns. Steve's creative. We're gonna put him on the call next time. Renee.
What do you think?
We really like it, so, but it's risky, too risky.
It's right across this.
Oh,
Small landlord fund. I think this is one of the things that came up that Stanford is pursuing. We'll have to do some more research on that.
Mark, when's the last 830G that's been proposed in town?
when was the last one? Woodrow, in Southport off of exit 95 or 19. Now, there are a couple that are bumping around, kicking around.
Right, the two that came presented here, they were, they didn't actually file the applications.
Yeah.
But they were 830G.
They weren't proposing 830G, they were
Right.
proposing a text amendment change. Even the one that John referenced earlier, I think they're trying to present it as a text amendment change, The idea, we've been talking, where is that one? Is it?
Stilson.
So it's Stilson, the upper end is Stilson. There's a couple, these are,
It's really right, it's right below Bill in the corner.
yeah, these are really deep lots. Really deep lots.
Geez, you mean,
Yeah, they're deep.
The first two houses?
Yeah.
Assisted living.
The developer owns one
Oh.
already, and they are deep.
They're very deep, they run
They are
behind
very
the commercial plaza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some wetlands on it, but the idea,
And it's DRD.
well, the idea was to go back and look at our previous regs as it relates to condo developments. A lot of the condos that we have here in town were developed under a different regulatory scheme that provided a slightly higher density than what is currently permitted. So there's been discussion about returning to that to provide an off-ramp alternative to an 830G application. And to allow for reasonable density, but not some crazy thing that's 830G.
like Dogwood or,
Right.
the other
So, and there are a couple examples right in that same neighborhood, right? So,
one, and by me.
so this would be the same density, but because of where it's located, it's a tough site from a traffic standpoint,
Yeah.
going into Black Rock Turnpike. So that's what you're gonna, there's concern there.
Yeah.
But there are a couple others kicking around like that, but there are also a few 830Gs set aside
So
applications.
his backyard,
Yes, for sure.
so there would be no, because that's a shame that there would be no access to Pansy, because that would certainly,
No access to.
Pansy, because then you would, you'd have, it would be a lot easier. Oh, it's all wetlands. Bridge.
That's that farm. It's still on the market.
Mark, who gets credit for that New York City hospital line is coming into the office building across from High Hill?
Oh, it's, yeah, it was.
Well, that's what I said, yeah.
You like that?
They're doing a partnership with Sloan.
Yeah, Sloan.
So,
Yeah, they're gonna house everything in there.
I think it's great.
Yeah, I agree.
and you recall that site was first approved for 25,000 medical office, then it was approved for 100 units, like 30G. Then it was reapproved for medical office, so.
You and I and Ken Fladel walked the property
Oh, wow.
15 years ago. A long time.
15.
Remember Ken was there?
I'm surprised they don't have Lyme disease from that.
Anybody else have anything?
Are we having an August 14th meeting?
You want one?
I don't. I won't be here.
It's the day after the primary, so.
I don't know that if
But-
there's some pressing need to do it, but otherwise I would think we would cancel, right?
I mean, the one thing that might indicate a need would be if something emerged from the POCD, but I think otherwise we could afford to wait until September. And we'll just keep everybody apprised of developments in the meantime.
So certainly the other thing would be is there's something pressing, we could do like we're doing with the Economic Development Commission tomorrow and largely meet via Zoom.
Yeah.
And, you know, those that wanna come here and hang out with me, that's great, but we can also have you.
So it's like a special meeting on it.
I think one other thing I mentioned before the meeting to Mark and others. Bridgeville is planning on having an aging in place fair, probably September. They've had one of these before whereby various service providers come and talk about services.
It's not big a fee.
Bigelow Center. Bigelow
It's a
Center.
senior center.
Yeah. So where service providers would come and notify, Mark's had his team there represented. I think this is an opportunity to maybe do this on a bigger scale this time. And for instance, we could talk about ADUs there.
That would be the place to do it.
We could talk about some of the things that the Affordable Housing Committee is doing as a means of publicizing our work. So housing trust fund, so all these things, and we've talked about, increasing our outreach.
Legacy.
Yeah.
So it's state not established as a, but I'll let everybody know when it is established, so we can start thinking about it and how we might want to make use.
Yeah, I think we should definitely do that. Good idea.
Would you like to approve the minutes?
We never made that far.
Oh.
We didn't vote. We had discussed, we had two, we had a motion,
Oh, yeah.
but we didn't vote.
Well, you had a question or something.
Yours was, who was the?
Who was that? And then it never got.
Yeah, I think
You satisfied, so now we can all.
I think the chair may have been asleep at the switch.
All this was under discussion in the minutes, so.
Yes.
Okay, the minutes have been approved. Thank you,
That's
Patrick.
so funny.
Well, that Chris came right in.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right, he marched in and we.
Discussion, so, yeah.
Timing was actually good when he came in, there was sort of, it was scheduled for 15 minutes, but we were expecting.
Seconded.
All in favor? We're adjourned.
I love you.